8. Maxine Hong Kingston has said that writing has been central to her life, and she has observed, "My writing is an ongoing function like breathing or eating." In her devotion to writing, she and our Tufts poets are kindred spirits. It is a profound honor to welcome Maxine Hong Kingston to the 20th anniversary of the Tufts Poetry Award celebration and to Claremont Graduate University today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Wendy, and thank all of you, especially the poets, for having me among you. I inherited 2 questions from my father, who wrote, painted, and sang poetry. In his day in China, the poem was painted, brushed in ink, written, and sung. The 2 questions which I've lived with all my life are, what is a poem? And who is the poet? My father told me that once, into his village, far away in southwest China, there appeared a man with black skin. Black skin like coal. Black like black ink. And my father said that he rubbed this man's arm thinking that the black would come off and then he could rub it on himself. And then after telling that to me, he said, "Oh, is that a poem? Am I a poet?" He had written 6 volumes of poetry when he was in China, and he lost them all. And when he came to America, he was not sure that what was coming to him was poetry. So when my father said, "Is that a poem? Am I a poet?" Well, I would answer, "Oh, yes, Baba, of course, that is a poem, and you are a poet. You were using similes, and that means you're a poet. And simile connects the strange, new, unique, and foreign to the familiar. And you have the power of simile. You are a poet." Now, I'm going to look to Linda Gregory to learn what is poetic. I learned from her that what is poetic, we can learn what is poetic by imagining what is not. She imagines, what if there was no poet's voice to hear? Can we imagine what is not there? A poet is one who can imagine what is not there. I think this is what Keats meant by negative capability. At the window. "Suppose," we said, "that the tumult of the flesh were to cease, and all that thoughts can conceive of earth, of water, and of air should no longer speak to us. Suppose that the heavens and even our own souls were silent, no longer thinking of themselves, but passing beyond. Suppose that our dreams and the visions of our imagination spoke no more, and that every tongue and every sign and all that is transient grew silent. For all these things have the same message to tell, if only we can hear it. And their message is this." Okay, I'm going to stop her poem right there. I'm sorry, Linda, for interrupting your poem and not ending it, but she is so daring. She has the poet's daring. She's going to tell us what the message is. And so there she has a colon, and for the rest of the poem, she tells us what the message is. So I will let you find that poem or someday hear it from Linda herself so that you can hear what the poetic message is that all of existence is telling us. She ends the this poem with 3 dots, the ellipses, dot, dot, dot. I think it means that the poem is open. It's open-ended so that after we have heard the ending, we can continue to hear what the message is. Now, looking to Timothy Donnelly, I have, I see that it is the power of the poet to face mystery, and he tells us in the face of mystery what a poet does not do, and also what a poet does. A poet waits forever to find out why. I'm going to read The Malady That Took the Place of Thinking. Notice that thinking does not seem to be the way to get to poetry. Thinking, reason, logic, it doesn't seem to be poetry. The malady that took the place of thinking. When I close my eyes, its voice insists we're close to solving once and for all, and with panache, those mysteries to which we've been applying ourselves so much these days, almost to the exclusion of all that I had taken to be the case, fact-wise. There had seemed to be only one world to adhere to, but now I can see how there really isn't any. Just roads with signs directing further, towards and away from the same humiliating no place you already are. These mysteries will be solved not one at a time, but in a slow, general unfolding along the lines of the magnolia, and trying to rush one solution by prying it open will compromise not only this solution, but many, if not all, the others. I'm not that person anymore with his hands immediately all over the magnolia. I'm not that other one either, stomping off, sorry he doesn't understand. If it looks like I'm thinking, I'm not. I'm waiting, and I can wait forever to find out why. My apologies to Timothy also, because I'm interrupting this poem, and I was going to just read this much and contemplate that the poet is the one who waits forever to find out why. But I do want to read the last 2 stanzas because here is the poet facing the mystery, and I feel that the last 2 stanzas are truly mysterious, and I'm not sure. I don't think I could put into logical words what the why is or what the message is, and I love these last 2 stanzas because they are at once mysterious, and entirely real. If it looked like I was sorry to look at that photograph of women and children shot down by an American battalion on a bright, clear day in March, look again. With no world to adhere to, there can be no photograph, no women, no children, and certainly no battalion shooting when there was nothing there to begin with. Now, I know that a poet is one who takes responsibility for love and time. And so I'm going to read the first movement of Katherine Larson's poem, Study for Love's Body. And here you will hear her, you will hear the poet take up responsibility for love and time. The first movement is called Landscape with Yellow Birds. The theories of love have become tremulous and complicated. The way snow falls or Saturn revolves repeatedly around some distance where space is nothing, yet still something that separates. Never mind time. Caterpillars have turned the fruit trees into body bags. The children paint the mandibles of fallen ones with silver meant for nursery stars. Without the immense responsibility of sympathy, these small deaths are nothing more than artifice. Like a single magnolia in a cut glass bowl, we have no idea where our roots went so suddenly. Oh, the pleasure of having poetry in my mouth and feeling it in my body and my ears. Surely that is how we know when we are hearing poetry. Poetry is beautiful, like magnolia, truthful, oracular, bardic. And then those are all adjectives. Maybe if I said the nouns, we can get to the essence and suchness of poet. Beauty, truth, oracle, bard. Congratulations, dear poets, and thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. What you just said reminded me of Emily Dickinson's famous observation about poetry, which I'm going to paraphrase because I don't think I have it exactly right. I know it is poetry when it takes the top of my head off. Is there any other way? And I think she was echoing, or you were echoing her sentiments exactly. I want to take this opportunity to introduce our past winners, many of whom are with us today, and our judges as well. This is a wonderful moment for me because these are people who are utterly dedicated to poetry, work hard for very little remuneration, and it really is from love, and we just want to let you all know how much we appreciate your efforts, especially on behalf of the Tufts Prizes. If you would just, as I call your name, just rise just for a second so people know who you are, and you don't have to stay standing the whole time, but just so people know who each of you are. Atsuro Riley. Okay. Now, Atsuro is the 2011 Kate Tufts Discovery Award winner for Romy's Order. In addition to the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, his work has been honored by the Witter Binner Award from the Library of Congress, the Pushcart Prize, and the Wood Prize from Poetry Magazine. Atsuro has done readings at the Library of Congress, the Untermeyer of 92nd Street Y, and the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. He lives near San Francisco. Patrick Phillips. I think Patrick is, yes, on my right. Patrick is the 2005 Kate Tufts Discovery Award winner for Chattahoochee. Hope I said it right. He received a Discovery, the Nation Award for his translations of the Danish poet Paul Lacour, and he received the Soberg Translation Prize of the American Scandinavian Foundation. He served as a Fulbright Scholar at the University of Copenhagen and is the McCracken Fellow in Renaissance Literature at New York University. Joni Mikowski. Joni is the 2003 Kate Tufts Discovery Award winner for The Zoo. She received the 2000 Associated Writing Programs Award in Poetry. Recent poems have appeared in journals such as the Yale Review, Poetry, the New England Review, and Slate Online. She was the 1998-2000 Wallace Stegner Fellow in Poetry at Stanford University, and she teaches at the University of Cincinnati. Kate Marvin. Kate is the 2002 Kate Tufts Discovery Award, so way back almost a decade ago. And she was the winner for her book, The World's Tallest Disaster, which won also a Catherine A. Morton Prize. Her second book was Fragment of the Head of a Queen. She co-edited the anthology Legitimate Dangers, American Poets of the New Century, and she teaches at the College of Staten Island, City University of New York. Henri Cole is the 2004 Kingsley Tufts Award winner for Middle Earth. Henri is the author of 6 books of poetry, including Touch and Middle Earth, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. His awards include the Berlin Prize of the American Academy in Berlin, the Rome Prize in Literature, and the 2006-07 McGee Professorship of Writing at Davidson College. Carl Phillips. Carl is a final judge, Tufts final judge, and he is also the 2002 Kingsley Tufts winner for The Tether. Carl is the author of many books of essays, translations, and poetry, most recently Double Shadow, for which he is being honored this coming weekend at the LA Times Festival of Books. His honors include the Witter Binner Foundation Fellowship and the Academy of American Poets Prize. He teaches creative writing in Washington at the University of St. Louis, Washington University in St. Louis. John Keaty, 1998 Tufts Award winner. 1998 Tufts Award winner for Falling Water. He is the author of many books, most recently Sally's Hair. His new and selected North Point North was a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. He is Distinguished Professor of Philosophy at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and he served as the first Poet Laureate of Milwaukee. Susan Mitchell. Susan Mitchell. Susan is the first Kingsley Tufts Award winner in 1993 for Rapture. I can still hear you reading from that book the night she won the prize. This book was also a National Book Award finalist. She is also the author of Eroticon, The Water Inside the Water, and her honors include fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Lannan Foundation, and the National Foundation for the Arts. She holds the Mary Blossom Lee Endowed Chair in Creative Writing at Florida Atlantic University. Kate Gale. Kate is a Tufts final judge. She is a poet, novelist, CGU alumna, and managing editor of Red Hen Press. She's also editor of the Los Angeles Book Review, and she has published 7 books of poetry and written 6 librettos. She's been very, very productive since she's gotten her PhD, and that was just a little while ago. We're very pleased to be able to honor an alum like this. Alice Quinn, who is a former Tufts final judge from 1996 to 2008, an executive director of the Poetry Society of America, and also former poetry editor of The New Yorker. And Alice, along with Robert Pinsky, edited the chapbook that you've all been given as you entered the room. They are the selections of Tufts winners since the beginning of the prize, and I hope you enjoy reading the poems. I think they will give you much pleasure for many years to come. And Alice, thank you for doing that. It was a big job. Linda, well, I'm going to wait to introduce Linda Gregerson because she will be introducing our winners. We have some judges who aren't here, and I would just like to mention their names. Jericho Brown, who is a Tufts preliminary judge. He's a poet and assistant professor of English at the University of San Diego. Andrew Feld, who is the editor of the Seattle Review and a preliminary Tufts judge. David Barber, who is a Tufts judge, Kingsley Tufts judge, and he is the editor of the Atlantic Monthly. Carl Phillips, I've already introduced, and Ted Genoways, who is also on the Kingsley Tufts final judging panel, and he is editor of the Virginia Quarterly Review. And finally, Suji Kwok Kim is retiring. She is retiring as a preliminary Tufts judge. She served 3 years on the panel, and she's a poet and playwright, assistant professor of English and Asian American Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And finally, Linda Gregerson is the chair of the Tufts Judging Committee and the 2003 Kingsley Tufts winner for Waterborne. She is the author of 5 books of poetry and criticism, most recently Magnetic North. Among her honors are an American Academy of Arts and Letters Award in Literature, 2 Pushcart Prizes, and a Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship. She teaches Renaissance literature and creative writing at the University of Michigan. Now, Linda will be introducing our Tufts winners today.
Thank you all for joining us this evening to celebrate 2 wonderful poets. I'm so honored to be able to introduce them. I did want to mention, just before I do that, however, the names of some very distinguished poets who were finalists for the Kate and Kingsley Tufts prizes this year. Finalists, in addition to Katherine Larson, were for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award were Julie Hansen for her book Unbeknownst, and Shane McCrae for his book Mule. And finalists in the Kingsley Tufts category, in addition to our winner, Timothy Donnelly, are Ed Roberson for his book To See the Earth Before the End of the World, and Christian Wyman for his book, Every Riven Thing. I wish we had a whole long night to spend here camped out, so I could encourage you all to listen to poems from all those volumes out loud. They represent an extraordinary and heartening range of work in contemporary American poetry. I mean, just stunning differentials in formal proposition, aesthetic affiliation, temperament, tonality, career stage, in fact, and the news from the front is really good. So this news, it is a special delight to read the books nominated every year for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, because these are poets who are just entering the conversation with first books of their own, and there is a world of delight to be had in reading. And as you might imagine, it's also a very challenging job because there's a lot of good work out there. Katherine Larson, wonderful poet, is also a research scientist and a field ecologist. And I am convinced that the combination of work she does in the world is absolutely central to the strength and originality of her work as a poet. The work she does as an ecologist and a scientist has in common with her work as a poet a quality of luminous attentiveness. She says in one poem, "I used to believe that science was only concerned with certainty. Later, I recognized the mystery." I think we often imagine wonder as a quality that we inevitably have to lose as we grow into increased certainty. This and Katherine's work altogether is a stunning reminder that wonder is also a cultivated aptitude, and that if we're very lucky and very good and very steadfast, it can be a faculty that increases for us. I want to read something very, very small to give you just an example of the way her quality of looking can move over the inventory of sensory information. This is from a long, multi-sectioned poem called Ghost Nets. The title of the sequence comes from those nets that the fishermen abandon in the ocean and then come to be deadly traps for living creatures who inhabit that ocean. Here's just one sentence from section 9. "We wake to sun stars stretching in the tide pools, and the stench of the rotting sea lion carcass with the plastic Coke bottle lodged inside its throat." The stunning quality of Katherine Larson's attentiveness to the world is all, I think, in little captured there. There is an extraordinary eye and ear for beauty, but also a refusal to edit out that which we have done in the world to intrude upon that beauty and intrude upon the health of the world around us. The world she writes about is a world populated with the miraculous real, the trilobite, the tide pool, and also those other forms of the real that we often wish we could turn away from, the washed up diapers and refuse on the tide line. She is a poet of extraordinary delicacy, of cadence, of remarkable visionary range, and extremely sophisticated and subtle formal masteries. We are thrilled and honored to award the Kate Tufts Discovery Award to Katherine Larson.
What a joy.
And we're going to hear from Katherine. She's going to read from this wonderful book.
My gosh, Linda, thank you so much for that introduction. I think I'm still blushing. It's such a tremendous honor to be here, and I'm so humbled and grateful and excited. And I just want to say, too, that I'm very honored to be reading tonight with Timothy Donnelly, whose book I love and admire as well. Can you hear me? So I have to actually read my poems from paper because I've lived so many years with them that they seem unfamiliar to me in the book. And it also gives me a chance to arrange their order so that I don't overwhelm you with my love of cephalopods. So I'm going to start with a poem called Metamorphosis, and this poem was partially inspired by a tremendous exhibit that I saw. A group of French underwater archaeologists had actually dredged the harbors of Alexandria and brought out sphinxes and columns and arches that were many thousands of years old. It was a really remarkable event to be able to see. Metamorphosis. It is astounding how little the ordinary person notices butterflies. Nabokov. We dredge the stream with soup strainers and separate dragonfly and damselfly nymphs, their eyes like inky bulbs, jaws snapping at the light as if the world was full of tiny traps, each hairpin mechanism tripped for transformation. Such a ricochet of appetites insisting life, life, life against the watery dark, the tuberous reeds. Tell me, how do they survive passage? I rinse our cutlery in the stream. Heat so heavy it hurts the skin, the drone of wild bees. We swim through cities buried in seawater. We watch the gods decay. We dredge the gods of other civilizations, the sun, for example, before the deity became a star. Jasper scarabs excavated from the hearts of kings. Daylights, blue-green waters pooling at the foot of falls. Sandstones where the canyon spills its verdant greens and vines. Each lunar resurrection, each helix churning in the cells of a sturgeon destined for spawning. Not equilibrium, but buoyancy, a hallway with 1,000 human brains carved out of crystal, quiet prisms until the sunlight hits. This next poem, Maxine was so lovely to introduce the first movement to. Study for Love's Body. 1. Landscape with yellow birds. The theories of love have become tremulous and complicated. The way snow falls or Saturn revolves repeatedly around some distance where space is nothing, yet still something that separates. Never mind time. Caterpillars have turned the fruit trees into body bags. The children paint the mandibles of fallen ones with silver meant for nursery stars. Without the immense responsibility of sympathy, these small deaths are nothing more than artifice. Like a single magnolia in a cut glass bowl, we have no idea where our roots went so suddenly. 2. Architecture in ruins. 3rd floor of the doll factory. Ferns suck carbon and sharper chemicals from air near the women working. They're hunched over tables of warped wood. Half of everyone is painting eyes and lashes on porcelain heads. The rest are threading hands to sleeves. Outside in the courtyard, a smattering of doves rise. Have you ever wanted to kiss a stranger's hands? 3. Gardens without bats or moss. Gauguin writes to Theo van Gogh that in his painting he wants to suggest the idea of suffering without ever explaining what kind. 4. In stone archways. The light is spilt green milk, which is languorous as the red monkey Gauguin painted by the brown body of Anna the Javanese. At the Chinese market, I buy 2 red teacups and a can of coconut milk. I think Gauguin wouldn't know how Anna loved that monkey and sang to him late at night. Everywhere, the sea screams at me. A great pink slab of octopus arm, beside it, babies seasoned in orange spices. Such symmetry. Surely they swam through the night like thirsty flowers. I think you had it right when you said love is the mathematics of distance. Split like a clam on ice, I feel raw, half-eaten. I rot in the cold blue of the ego, the crushed velvet of Anna's chair. And actually, I referenced symmetry in that poem. It's in fact bilateral symmetry, not radial symmetry, like the title of my book. All right, this next poem has a little bit of a lengthy epigraph, but it's important to the poem. It's called Masculine Feminine. And this epigraph is from Margaret Mead, who says, "The material suggests that many, if not all, of the personality traits which we have called masculine or feminine are as lightly linked to sex as are the clothing, the manners, and the form of headdress that a society at a given period assigns to either sex." Masculine, feminine. In a dream, Baudelaire comes to me as a blue-faced baboon. He's skinny and wearing a look of such intensity it could make stars sprout antennae. I tell him about M. Mead, but he interrupts me. "Yes," he says impatiently, "forget the flawed anthropologist. Can't the cat be both animal and mistress with its pelt of electric fur?" I say my mother wakes each morning a red-tailed hawk. My father, a purple urchin on a silver dish. We hear the cactus whisper, "Pollinate me, furry moth." The rattlesnake at our feet reminds us that he sees the world in infrared. And then the clouds, which in my language are neither male nor female, come to pin up my hair with their tiny, torn tufts. Low tide evening. On the bus from the west coast of Ireland, a woman stares past rain pooling on the window, clover fields hemmed in by rough stone. The man next to her has fingers trapped in a botanical book. He sleeps. She knows that south of Galway, where they strayed through terraced shales and gray-blue limestones searching for fossils, the sea licks pale lichens off the rocks, and everywhere the spirits are hungry. Say you leave a crust of bread on your plate. 100 of them could last for weeks on this. If you said a prayer with your meal, the offering might feed a multitude. But then the sea always asks for more. She closes her eyes. The cool consequence of creatures that glided through ancient seabeds. I travel half the world, and still I feel chased. She thinks of dinner with the man, sawdust floors, a muscle split and rusty against the polished ebony of the bowl, its sea smell like the beach at low tide, walking through the inhuman hour when the world resolves into a single blue pane of stained glass, the gulls and shadows involved with one thing only, hunger. She is suddenly aware of her desire for him across the table next to him in the bus, but it makes her shiver the way those shelves split apart, like half-black moons that gave off no light, only shadows, and they were legion. Okay, another cephalopod poem. I reference a Norse demigod in this poem, Eyjafjandil, who was brought across the icy wastes in a basket, and his big toe was sticking out of the basket. So at some point, Thor broke it off and tossed it up into the sky where it became a star. Love at 32 degrees. 1. Today I dissected a squid, the late acacia tossing its pollen across the black of the lab bench. In a few months, the maples will be bleeding. That was the thing. There was no blood, only textures of gills folded like satin, such suction cups like planets in rows. Be careful not to cut your finger, he says, but I'm thinking of fingertips on my lover's neck last June. Amazing hearts, this branchial heart. After class, I stole one from the formaldehyde and watched it bloom in my bathroom sink between the cubes of ice. 2. Last night, I threw my lab coat in the fire and drove all night through the Arizona desert with a thermos full of silver tequila. It was the last of what we bought on our way back from Guadalajara. Desert wind in the mouth, your mother's beat-up Honda, agaves twisting up from the soil like the limbs of cephalopods. Outside of Tucson, Saguaro's so lovely, considering the cold and the fact that you weren't there to warm me. Suddenly drunk, I was shouting that I wanted to see the stars as my ancestors used to see them, to see the god-awful blue as Irvandil's frostbitten toe. 3. Then there is the astronomer's wife, ascending stairs to her bed. The astronomer gazes out, one eye at a time, to a sky that expands even as it falls apart, like a paper boat dissolving in bilge, furious, fuming stars. When his migraine builds and lodges its dark anchor behind the eyes, he fastens the wooden buttons of his jacket and walks outside with a flashlight to keep company with the barn owl, who stares back at him with eyes that are no greater or less than a spiral galaxy. The snow outside is white and quiet as a woman's slip against cracked floorboards. So he walks to the house, inflamed by moonlight, and slips into the bed with his wife, her hair and arms all in disarray, like fish confused by waves. 4. Science, beyond pheromones, hormones, aesthetics of bone. Every time I make love for love's sake alone, I betray you. And one last poem. This poem is for Alex. Risk. In the dream, I'm given a monkey heart and told to be careful how I love because of the resulting infection. Suddenly, a hard-boiled egg with no yolk, I pitched down a great hill in a holy city, past the flaming beakers of ethanol, the lapis bowls in which science would peel me apart. And when I skid into a fleshy patch of grass, I unroll into a grub with the mind of a girl with the lips of an insect. A voice says, metamorphosis will make you ugly. I answer, radiance will change its name. In the heat, I squirm and shrug out of my summer suit and breathless split into a cotton dress. It is almost evening. There are fireflies. On the lawn of my childhood house, an operating table, doctors, a patient under a sheet. I walk up. Under the webbing of IVs, a surgeon hands me a silver comb, and I start brushing the patient's hair like I did my mother's when I was a girl. The nurse lifts the sheet. It isn't my mother. It's the monkey. I bend my ear to its dying lips, and it says, you haven't much time. Risk it all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katherine. I am delighted to now introduce the winner of the Kingsley Tufts Award, Timothy Donnelly, whose second book, The Cloud Corporation, just bowled us over this year. He's published one earlier book, 27 Props for a Production of Ein Lebenszeit. It is not common for this award to go to a second book. I know it happened with Susan's book. To my knowledge, that's the only instance. instance. So year 1 and year 20. And it has to be a pretty extraordinary book to command our attention in this category. As you know, the Kingsley Tufts was designated by the donors as a book to be given for a poet in mid-career. Now, we've had many an intricate conversation about how we are to construe that. We have taken those guidelines and Kate Tufts' generous endowing spirit to mean that we were to award this prize to a poet of significant distinction and mature accomplishment, but not to give it as an after-the-fact purse to one whose career had already been stamped in stone and acknowledged by a vast list of other prizes. In other words, she didn't mean it to be just a bit of richness given as an afterthought to a career that had already been entirely established, but rather to one that was notable for both significant achievement and a continuing upward trajectory. And believe me, that is absolutely what we expect of you, Timothy Donnelly. The Cloud Corporation is a fabulous title, and it manages to capture the very important quality and range of this work, which is to say the oxymoronic conjunction of ineffability and firmness that might be actually a definition of poetry. And when it's good, the ineffability having to do with spirit, and also the understanding, the effort to capture in words that which is always exceeding our ability to formulate it, as well as the firmness that has to do with meticulous articulation and formal intelligence. And boy, we have that in spades in the Cloud Corporation. That oxymoronic quality also has to do with, juxtaposing the infinitely malleable landscape of the imagination and the flat-out mortar and brickwork spreadsheets and internal audits of accommodation to reality and the everyday and the pragmatic, and in some instances, the deadeningly corporate. This is a book that is keenly aware of that other form of the corporate, that aspect of our lives that we live together as a collective, and which entails sweeping, ethical, as well as aesthetic obligations. This book is fabulous for it's the range of its music is really extraordinary. Sometimes I think it's a fabulous handbook in the use of internal rhyme alone. I mean, it's just gorgeous that way, and something immensely important to me. Its deployment of the English sentence, which is to say of syntax, is just masterful. It's really stunning. And it reminds us that that architecture of language we call syntax is itself a form of inherited intelligence and contractual understanding. And it's just, deploys this with great, great brilliance. I want to read, again, a tiniest piece here. Maxine stole the sentence I was going to read, and she read it so well, I daren't do it again. But here's an example of the way that this mastery of syntax, it's not some highbrow, exclusionary, ivory tower formulation. It's really a mode of being in the world. And here's just one sentence. I love that when I call you on the long, drab days, practicality keeps one of us away from the other, that I am calling a person so beautiful to me that she has seen my awkwardness on the actual sidewalk, but she still answers anyway. And you hear something, too, of the incredibly flexible tonalities. That is one of the great strengths of this poet. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Timothy Donnelly to this stage. Please help me.
Thank you so much for that. I have this terrible capacity to both believe in almost anything and also simultaneously to disbelieve in it. And I'm kind of finding myself in the throes of that capacity right now. I'm sure that I'm here, but it seems to me impossible that this could actually be happening. I've known it was supposed to happen for a couple of months now. And there's lots of tangible evidence around me. So, okay, this is really happening. And let me see, I made note cards, and it's not going to make any sense. I want to say how grateful I am, and I want to say some particular people, mention some particular people to whom I am grateful. Wendy Martin, Deborah Freund, John McGuire, and Maxine Hong Kingston. It was such an honor to hear you read that poem of mine. I became quite worked up hearing that, and quite worked up too, Linda, when I heard you read that introduction. It was extremely touching to me. And I want to thank also the 3 preliminary judges, Jericho Brown, Suji Kim, and Andrew Feld, and also the 5 judges who chose to give this amazing prize to my book. Carl Phillips, Linda Gregerson again, Kate Gale, also David Barber, and Ted Genovese. I found that because I couldn't quite believe this was really happening, I didn't feel what I knew was I didn't feel in touch with the strong sort of emotional force that this was having just underneath the threshold of my availability, until I compelled myself to think about it this way, that at some point in the judging, my book passed through all 5 sets of hands, and through their minds too, and they said, well, I can't dismiss this one, not yet, maybe this one. And it just kind of blows my mind that they kept coming back to it, and that they did choose it. I never really expected anything like this. And it will change my life, and it will change the life of the 3 people I love most, my wife and my 2 children. And I'm almost mortified with honor, and I'm really so grateful. And let me not miss out on the opportunity to thank as well Kate and Kingsley Tufts, who have left behind this beautiful and outrageous and noble legacy that I'm so flattered to have become part of. And I'm going to read, I believe, 4 poems. And the first is The New Intelligence, and it's for my wife, to whom I dedicate this book. After knowledge extinguished the last of the beautiful fires our worship had failed to prolong, we walked back home through pedestrian daylight to a residence humbler than the one left behind, a door without mystery, a room without theme. For the hour that we spend complacent at the window overlooking the garden, we observe an arrangement in rust and gray-green, a vagueness at the center whose slow, persistent movements some sentence might explain if we had time or strength for sentences, to admit that what falls, falls solitarily, lost in the permanent dusk of the particular, that the mind that fear and disenchantment fatten comes to boss the world around it, morbid as the damp-fingered guest who rearranges the cheeses the minute the host turns to fix her a cocktail, a disease of the will, the way false birch branches arch and interlace from which hands dangle last leaf parchments and a very large array of primitive bird shapes. Their pasted feathers shake in the aftermath of the nothing we will ever be content to leave the way we found it. I love that about you. I love that when I call you on the long drab days practicality keeps one of us away from the other, that I am calling a person so beautiful to me that she has seen my awkwardness on the actual sidewalk, but she still answers anyway. I say that when I fell, you fell beside me, and the concrete refused to apologize, that a sparrow sat for a spell on the windowsill today to communicate the new intelligence, that the goal of objectivity depends upon one's faith in the accuracy of one's perceptions, which is to say, a confidence in the purity of the perceiving instrument. I won't be dying after all, not now, but will go on living dizzily hereafter in reality, half deaf to reality, in the room perfumed by the fire that our inextinguishable will begins. I'll read the title poem, The Cloud Corporation. It's a little longer, and I think if I had to point to what I would define as the primary theme of this poem, it would be more or less a contemplation of the pervasiveness of corporate forces in our daily lives. But when my mom read this poem after it appeared in the magazine Harper's, and my parents could get that magazine quite easily, and so they read it, and my mom said to me, "Well, I know what it's about, you know." And I said, "Oh, you do, Mom?" And she said, "Yep, I do." And I said, well, what do you think it's about?" And she said, "Well, it's about how hard it is to live in a world in which the most important thing is money." And I said, "Yeah, you got it. You got it." And I think that I've been aware of that my whole life. I feel like I've been struggling financially ever since I knew what money was. And I believe that the insistence that there are things of value that money can't touch is something that I learned from my mom. And so I dedicate this poem to her. The Cloud Corporation. The clouds part revealing a mythology of clouds assembled in light of earliest birds, an originary text over water over time, and that without which the clouds part revealing an apology for clouds, implicit in the air where the clouds had been, recently witnessed rehearsing departure, a heartfelt phrase in the push of the airborne drops and crystals over water, over time, how being made to think oneself an obstruction between the observer and the object or objects under surveillance or even desired, or if I am felt to be beside the point, then I have wanted that. But to block a path is like not being immaterial enough or being too much when all they want from you now is your station cleared of its personal effects, please, and vanish. Not that they'd ever just come out and say it when all that darting around of the eyes, all that shaky camouflage of paper could only pretend the beginning of the end of your tenure at this organization. And remember, a capacity to draw meaning out of such seeming accidents landed one here to begin with, didn't it? 2, the clouds part revealing an anatomy of clouds viewed from the midst of human speculation, a business project undertaken in a bid to acquire and retain control of the formation and movement of clouds. As late afternoons I have witnessed the distant towers borrow luster from a bourbon sun, inbox empty, surround sound on, all my money made in lieu of conversation, where conversation indicates the presence of desire in the parties to embark on exchange of spirit, hours forzando with heartfelt phrase made metaphor for it, the face on the clock tower bright as a meteor, as if a torch were held against likelihood to illuminate the time so I could watch the calm, silent progress of its hands from the luxury appointments of my office suite, the tumult below or behind me, out of mind, had not my whole attention been riveted by the human figure stood upon the tower's topmost pinnacle, himself surveying the clouds of the future parting in antiquity, a figure not to be mistaken, tranquilly pacing a platform with authority, the chief executive officer of clouds. 3, the clouds part revealing blueprints of the clouds built in glass front factories carved into cliff faces which, prior to the factory's recent construction, provided dorms for clans of Hamadryas baboons, a species revered in ancient Egypt as attendants of Tot, god of wisdom, science, and measurement. Fans conveying clouds through aluminum ducts can be heard from up to a mile away, depending on air temperature, humidity, the absence or presence of any competing sound, its origin, and its character. It is no more impossible to grasp the baboon's full significance in Egyptian religious symbolism than it is to determine why clouds we manufacture provoke in an audience more positive, lasting response than do comparable clouds occurring in nature. Even those who consider natural clouds products of conscious manufacture seem to prefer that a merely human mind lie behind the products they admire. This development may be a form of self-exalting, or else another adaptation in order that we find the hum of machinery comforting through darkness. 4, the clouds part revealing there's no place left to sit myself down except for a single wingback chair backed into a corner to face the window in which, the clouds part revealing the insouciance of clouds cavorting over the backs of the people in the field who cut the ripened barley, who gather it in sheaves, who beat grain from the sheaves with wooden flails, who shake it loose from the scaly husk around it, who throw the now threshed grain up into the gently palm-fanned air whose steady current carries off the chaff as the grain falls to the floor, who collect the grain from the floor painstakingly to grind it into flour, who bake the flour into loaves the priest will offer in the sanctuary, its walls washed white like milk, to perform it repeatedly, to perform it each time as if the first, to walk the dim corridor believing that the conference it leads to might change everything, to adhere to a possibility of reward, of betterment, of moving above, with effort, the condition into which one has been born. To whom do I owe the pleasure of the hum to which I have been listening too long? 5, the clouds part revealing the advocates of clouds, believers in people, ideas and things, the workers of the united fields of clouds, supporters of the wars to keep clouds safe, the devotees of heartfelt phrase and belief you can change with water over time. It is the habit of a settled population to give ear to whatever is desirable will come to pass, a caressing confidence, but one unfortunately not borne out by human experience. For most things people desire have been desired ardently for thousands of years, and observe, they are no closer to realization today than in Ramses' time, nor is there cause to believe they will lose their coyness on some near tomorrow. Attempts to speed them on have been undertaken from the beginning. Plans to force them overnight are in copious, antagonistic operation today, and yet they have thoroughly eluded us, and chances are they will continue to elude us until the clouds part in a flash of autonomous, ardent, local brain work. But when the clouds start to knit back together again, we'll dismiss the event as a glitch in transmission. 6, the clouds part revealing a congregation of bodies united into one immaterial body, a fictive person around whom the air is blurred with money, force from which much harm will come, to whom my welfare matters nothing. I sense without turning the light from their wings, their eyes, they preen themselves on the fire escape, the windowsill, their pink feet vulnerable. a mistake to think of them that way. If I turn around, the room might not be full of wings, capable of acting in many respects as a single being, which is to say that I myself may be the source of what I sense, but am no less powerless to change it. Always around me, on my body, in my mouth, I fear them in their love of money. Everything I do without thinking to help them make it. And if I am felt to be beside the point, I have wanted that, to live apart from what depends on killing me a little bit to keep itself alive, and yet not happily with all its needs and comforts met, but fattened so far past that point, I am engrossed. And if I picture myself outside of it, it isn't me anymore, but a parasite cast out, inviolable. 7. The clouds part revealing the distinction between words without meaning and meaning without words, a phenomenon of nature, the westbound field of low air pressure developing over water over time, and warm, saturated air on the sea surface rising, steadily replaced by cold air from above, the cycle repeating, the warm moving upward into massive thunderclouds, the cold descending into the eye, around which bands of thunderclouds spiral, counterclockwise, often in the hundreds, the atmospheric pressure dropping even further, making winds accelerate, the clouds revolve, a confusion of energy, an incomprehensible volume of rain. I remember the trick of thinking through infinity, a crowd of eyes against an asphalt wall, my vision of it scrolling left as the crowd thinned out to a spatter, and then just black until I fall asleep, and then just black again, past marketing, past focus groups, past human resources, past management, past personal effects, their insignificance evident in the eye of the dream, and through much of the debriefing I wake into next. Thank you very much. 2 more poems, and they are shorter. The first is going to be called, and is called, His Future as Attila the Hun. I keep a copy of Gibbon's History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire in my bathroom, and I'll pick it up every now and then, and I'll find a little bit in there to keep me occupied. And one afternoon, I found this little piece of history included in there. At one point, a shepherd presented Attila with a sword that had been discovered in an interesting way, which I recount in the poem. And with this sword, Attila immediately recognized it as the sword of Mars. And he understood that with this sword, he'd be able to bring down the Roman Empire. And in this poem, there's a wish to bring down another kind of empire. Attila didn't do it, and I don't imagine that the speaker of this poem will either. His future as Attila the Hun. But when I try to envision what it might be like to live, detached from the circuitry that suffers me to crave what I know I'll never need, or what I need but have in abundance already, I feel the cloud of food court breakfast loosen its embrace. I feel the shopping center drop as its escalator tenders me up to the story intended for conference space. I feel my doubt diminish, my debt diminish. I feel a snow that falls on public statuary doesn't do so sadly because it does so without profit. I feel less toxic. I feel the thought my only prospect lies under a train for the coverage. Stop. Don't think I never thought that way, because I have and do. All through blank October, $1 in my pocket, back and forth to university. Let the record not show. I have deserted me for what I lack and am not worth. All of this unfolds through episodes that pale as fast as others gain from my inertia. I have watched, I'll keep watching, out from under blankets as the days trip over the days before, out cold on the gold linoleum behind them, where we make the others rich with sick persistence. But when I try to envision what it might be like to change, I see 3 doors in front of me, and by implication, opportunity, rooms full of it as the mind itself is full, thinking of a time before time was, or of the infinite couch from which none part, and while the first two doors have their appeal, it's the third I like best, the one behind which opens a meadow, vast, and in it, grazing on buttercups, an errant heifer with a wounded foot, its bloody hoofprints followed by a curious shepherd back to something sharp in the grass, the point of a long sword which, unearthed, the shepherd now polishes with his rodent skin tunic, letting the Eurasian sun play upon it for effect, a gift for me, a task, an instrument to lay waste to the empire now placed before me at my feet. And this last poem that I'll read, only after saying, Katherine, you're up here. Right? Yeah, you're right. I sometimes wear glasses. It's a real honor to be reading with you, and Radial Symmetry is an amazing book, so it's a real pleasure. This poem is called Lycopodium obscurum, and this is the Latin name, of a small plant that grew abundantly behind my home when growing up. Maybe some of you know it as club moss. It's popular out east. It grows successfully in the Northeast. I played with this plant a great deal as a child, and then the land on which it grew disappeared as I got older, and I only later found that my parents had sold all this land behind my house to pay for my college education. I received that news with mixed feeling, but gratitude wins out, and I imagine that those plants that had to suffer for my college education are still with me in some spectral form, and they're present in my imagination. I dedicate this poem to them and also to my dad. Lycopodium obscurum. If it's true that a person has to become more than half dead to this world to live in it happily, then I'll be happy never to live in it happily again. Let the phenomena alternately capsize and crank me up into the Atlantic air. I will hang there, jangling, till the point of view turns out to be borne on the concave back of some far too faulty conception of happiness, which is to say, just say the word and I'll tear it down and get back to work. Here in my dirt laboratory, here where I take my time and have it, what shatters on the workbench wends its way to the floor in light-feathered sentences whose truth content amounts to as much as the average rainfall between syllables in silver. Sentences that chirp insights back and forth nights like peckish metaphysicists united over pastry, an altarpiece of it, baroque in an effort to avoid further scrutiny of the universal diagram for the formulation of questions regarding every possible proposition. Having only recently tattooed it to the taut backs of truffle hogs, we then released into the autumn of their abutting acreage to no avail. I can't fault them. They can't be faulted. Not entirely. Not when the need to articulate their quest in material terms animates limbs no less than hungers of the body. But something keeps going wrong, something that calls for cold long walks through quiet acreage, a chance to glimpse, as in time-lapse photography, the pert tassels of what's classified as a fern ally insist through the topsoil. I never knew its binomial till long after the woods in which it grew got axed to pay for my tutorials. We ranch-style houses fortify that land now, habitats where lives like mine go drab between lasagna and last month's crossword puzzles. Dust descends on candy dishes. Radon detectors blink plainly in the basements. The sentences want to know how much of what they perceive is actually a message. Sorry, I stand corrected. What they really want to know is how much of what they perceive is actually a pastry. Pretty much all of it, I say. After so many failed strivings into darkness, into ether, they've come to value most what they can lay their hands on, place inside their mouth. All that animus spent hunting the intrinsic instead of honing methods to evaluate the relative wore them out. Go to bed, little sentences. The ghosts of club moss rise up because I've felt them here. I tend to them this way, a member of their movement. And maybe what erupts calls for that, for less grid work and more choreography, for a form including time, change, and not just setting into fixed position, although back in the day the sentences would have wagered all dance had grid work hidden in it. Tonight I'll board the ship with caution, because it is too dark now not to. Hands on the rope rail, eyes on my feet, up the gangplank and back against the stars, beneath which happiness will be thought the motion of a mind whereby a value is performed, like a show of respect for the forest that startles us into feeling at home being lost in it. Insofar as this position can only be borne on the back of a somewhat loose conception of feeling, I am starting a new way to feel. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, both poets, for wonderful readings. We really were very, very happy to hear these poems, as you could tell. I want to thank you all for helping us to celebrate our winners, the 20th anniversary of the Tufts Poetry Awards and poetry in general today. In the lobby are copies of the chapbook of poetry, which of all the Tufts winners that I mentioned from 1993 to 2000, selected by former Tufts judges Alice Quinn and Robert Pinsky. Many of you already have copies, but if you don't, be sure to get one in the lobby. And please join us for a reception in the lobby and a book signing. The authors, all of the poets and Maxine Hong Kingston will be signing copies of their books, so I hope you will come out, have a glass of wine, and enjoy yourselves. Thanks again.